Welcome to this DaVinci Resolve Fusion node breakdown. Today's node is the depth blur node. Now the depth blur node is used to create focal length or depth of field effects using 3D rendered images based on the included Z channels. So before we jump in the node in Fusion, we're going to go to Blender. And I'm going to use Blender because it's free, so any of y'all can use it. But this is generally the same for any 3D program. Most of them render out or export Z passes and miss passes. And the Z is also called the depth pass, and the miss pass is a miss pass. And I don't want anyone to confuse these because they do two completely different things. So if we look at an actual render of this scene, if we look at our miss pass pretty much creates a miss pass or a depth of field pass, sometimes it's used for, but it's generated based off our actual scene. So it's always going to start from black and go to white. Black being the closest and white being the furthest. Now, a depth pass or a Z pass is going to look like it's unusable, but there's a lot more information in this pass than there is in the miss pass. And this is the pass that most of Fusion nodes need to be able to use that data to use, say, the blur or different nodes, which we'll go over. So just know there is a difference between the miss pass and a Z pass or a depth pass. So in Blender, as in most other programs, on your passes, you want to make sure you export the Z pass. And I'm going to uncheck this mist. And then as far as your camera goes, in Blender, you can see what your actual Z depth is. If you go to your camera and go down to View Port Display and make sure your limits is checked. And when it is, you'll get this yellowish orange line extended from your camera out. And to adjust this from your camera to how far you want this to go out, you're going to use your clip start and clip end. So if I change this clip end, you can see it's changing my depth. So that last depth pass or that last clip will be our furthest reach of our Z depth. And then when you actually render it out, you want to make sure you render it out as an OpenEXR multi-layer, so you're rendering out your combined and the other layers along with that Z depth information. So jumping into Fusion, we're going to go ahead and add a loader node and bring in our footage. And I'm going to bring in a gamut. And change this to sRGB so we can see what's going on. So this is our footage. When I exported this out, I didn't export it with any depth of field, any motion blur, nothing. So it's just a straight computerized render, and it looks like a computerized render. So in order to change that, to give it a little organicness and a little camera feel to it, we can add a depth blur. And the depth blur can be connected straight in line. You have two inputs for the depth blur. This is your input coming from your loader node where your Z depth information is coming from. If you don't have that Z depth information, you can also use this input to just input straight footage. The only difference is you'll lose all these selections other than the blur size. So we're going to input this into our input. And in order for this node to pick up our Z depth information, we need to go to our loader node, go to Format, Channels, and under the Z, we need to select our Scene Depth Z. So now that Z buffer, Z depth information is being pushed to that node. So if we go back to the blur node, Up top, you had the choice of 3 filters: the box, soften, or super soften. And that just depends on how the softness of your depth blur is going to look. Down here you have which channel you're using, and since we're using our Z buffer information, we're going to keep it on Z, but you also got red, green, blue, alpha, and luma, and these are primarily for if you're using the information coming in from this green input. You've also got lock your Y and Z for your blur size, and your blur size actually dictates how blurry that blur is actually going to be. So if we look in here, we can see around here it getting blurred and unblurred. Now your focal point, this is what you use to select your distance from your camera to focus on. So as we change it, you can see different stuff coming into focus. And since our scene didn't have such a huge difference, it's only, I want to say 30 meters, we're not going to get a huge difference in the actual amount of blur, so we're going to have to rein this in. But you've also got this sample button. And what this sample button is doing is it's sampling that Z information, not the colors of your actual RGB. It's sampling that Z information that's stored in your Z buffer. So if we click and hold our sample, we can click wherever we want our focus to be, and that'll put our focus, our focal point on that location. Now your depth of field is basically your depth of field, but mind you, this is going to have a huge difference depending on how large your Z buffer information is. So you can see we're making huge changes and it's really not changing much. We've only got that little sliver just because our depth of field in our scene was so small. And you can kind of look at this depth of field based around your focal point number. So in this scene, we've got our focal point set to 2.2. So if we set our depth of field to 2.2, which is pretty much our focal point, anything further or closer is going to be out of focus. And now mind you, this number is going to change depending on how large your scene is. So if we have an exterior scene that we set up with a huge landscape and mountains way in the back and our depth of field is huge, these numbers are going to be completely different, and it's going to operate completely different than it is with our scene where we've got, 90 feet of information. So just keep that in mind. Now, since that is a problem, because since your Z buffer is based off real world distances, you have your Z scale button down here. And this is where we can change our Z scale to reflect what we want our look to look like as opposed to what the real world depth of field would look like. So if I zoom out and fit, you can see this is a default setting of our real world information. It's just fairly out of focus back here. But if I start bringing this down, you can see we can start finding or looking for that sweet spot to bring everything else out of focus and leave her in focus. And then once you have that, you can start changing your blur size to get rid of some of that halation that's going on and find a nice level. So now we've got some depth of field. But this image still is not quite realistic because we're missing one other thing that our real world organics are going to grab, and that's motion blur. And we went over that the other day. So we're going to bring in a vector motion blur. And we're going to add that. We're going to copy our loader node, paste that, bring that into our green input, and go to format and uncheck this Z information on this one. And instead of our combined RGB, we're going to use our vector X, Y, and Z, and bring in our original footage. Or actually, let's bring it in here, so we can just view this with our blurred info. And then once we go and change this to our red, in green info, we've got our motion blur. So that looks much better than our original stagnant footage that looks way too sharp and computerized to that. So we'll give this a playthrough. And there we go. We went from this computerized image to adding depth blur to adding vector motion blur to get a much more organic, better looking computer rendered image. So that is the depth blur node. I will see you in the next node breakdown.